Number 8. 14K. The 14K is probably the most extreme example of the depths of depravity that triads, crime groups operating in China, can really get down to. With 20,000 members, most of what they do revolves around trafficking heroin around the globe. But the 14K take things a few steps further. They engage in human trafficking and prostitution. The triad has no qualms about treating individuals like livestock for the sake of profit. Whether it's loan sharking, illegal gambling, contract murder, or home invasions, there is very little the triad isn't willing to do, and their chapter in Hong Kong remains the dominant group in their area. One of their most famous members is Kuok-koi, also popularly known as Broken Tooth. Growing up in the slums of Macau and living a life of street violence, he soon started working under the 14K gangster Niwa. As Broken Tooth showed his talent for violence, Wai tasked him with murdering his own boss. As Wan's influence grew, he established legal gambling institutions that earned him $6 million a year, and Wan became a wealthy public figure in Macau. But he was soon arrested and sentenced to prison for 15 years for illegal gambling, loan sharking, and even an attempted car bombing. If anything, this is truly indicative of the kind of person crime organizations breed in order to gain their twisted concept of success. Number 7. Crips. After World War II, African American communities faced some of the worst aftermaths of the war, with worsening economy affecting them disproportionately. Young men banded together to form so-called street clubs, which slowly evolved into the gangs we traditionally know and understand. In South Central Los Angeles, Stanley Tukey Williams and Raymond Lee Washington met one day back in 1969, allying their two small gangs with each other to battle other neighboring gangs. The average age of the members was about 17 years old at the time. Change for them came when crack cocaine entered the market in the early 1980s, and they got involved in distributing the drug illegally. The gang grew rapidly, with over 30,000 members by the end of the 20th century. Part of the initiation ceremony used to be getting jumped, a sustained, brutal, and bloody beating of the new recruit to test their discipline, willpower, and toughness. To them, it was necessary to build up members that could stand such treatment, since they would make money off the criminal activities including gun running, prostitution, and auto theft. Members of the gang have been convicted of assault and murder, actions that members carry out exclusively with the intention of maintaining their reputation and status. In 2013, Sean Nelms was convicted of murdering a rival gang member, shooting him through the chest after consulting a fellow Crips member. His reasoning was simple. If he spotted a rival, it was his responsibility to help the Crips maintain control over their territory and eliminate possible threats. However, no mention of the Crips is ever complete without talking about their rivalry with the next gang on our list. Number 6. Bloods. The Bloods are the rivals to the Crips and have been so since their creation, considering they were initially formed in order to protect community members from being extorted by Crips during the early years in Los Angeles. Eventually, as the need for protection escalated, so did the means it was obtained, and the Bloods became as ruthless of a gang as the Crips. Given that the two formed in the same region and had similar trajectories with their growth coming from the sale of cocaine, the two also shared values and organizational cultures as well. Getting jumped into the gang was something prevalent in the initiation of new recruits in the Bloods as much as it was in the Crips. The Bloods had widespread violent campaigns. At one point, 83 members of the gang were convicted individually of murder during the same prosecution in 2020. One member, Dricko Deshaun Husky, was charged with the murder of a man he shot during an argument and then continued to empty his magazine even after the man's body had hit the ground. What do you think of this gang rivalry? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you're liking this video so far, be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our latest content. Number 5. Latin Kings. The Latin Kings are a Puerto Rican street gang established in 1954 in the city of Chicago. They've grown to become one of the largest Hispanic gangs in the world, with 25,000 members in just Chicago alone. They originated as a defense against the racism the Puerto Rican community in Chicago faced at the hands of the Greek and Italian gangs, before it eventually devolved into profiteering off of illicit activities. As a gang, they are significantly more sophisticated than many of their rivals, with strict hierarchical structures, codified operational procedures, a manifesto, and a policy on discipline that ensures the gang structure is respected and followed. They have an official committee that hears about the alleged offenses committed by accused gang members, and if the accused is found guilty, they can be given either a non-corporal punishment, which could be something along the lines of community service, or a corporal punishment as severe as termination on site. Yikes! Their commitment to organization left a retired detective commenting, quote, "When you compare them to other street gangs like the Bloods or the Crips, none compare to the organization of the Latin Kings," end quote. Making money through drug trafficking, they are embroiled in a world that demands violence, and violence they give. In 1995, the corpse of William Cartagena was found burnt with the head decapitated and the appendages mutilated. It was discovered that Luis Felipe, the founder of the New York chapter of the Latin Kings, ordered a kill on sight for Cartagena while sitting in prison, sending letters to communicate his demands. The respect for hierarchy, rather than reining in their violent streak, enables them to perform cruel actions with greater zeal, which also leads to more fear. Number 4. Aryan Brotherhood. When discussing violence of the highest order in the past century, our minds often trail back to World War II and the Holocaust, where Nazis orchestrated one of the most tragic events to plague human history and slaughtered millions. It's to be expected that any group of people to affiliate themselves with that philosophy could easily just be as deadly, just as dangerous, and just as violent. The Aryan Brotherhood proves that theory correct. As a group of neo-Nazis that formed as a prison gang after the desegregation of prisons in the United States, the Aryan Brotherhood is a ruthless, racist group where initiates are required to murder another inmate as soon as they join, usually either African American or Hispanic American, unless the inmate belongs to a rival gang. Their crimes are severe and can range from organizing male prostitution rings within the prison systems to distributing crack cocaine to murder for hire or worse. But it's the propensity towards race-driven murders for no reason at all that places them among the most dangerous groups in all of America. The scale of their violence is so severe that estimates have placed them being responsible for 18 to 25% of all murders in federal prisons, despite making up only 0.1% of the prison population. In May 2018, one member named Robert John Stockton committed a crime displaying the ruthlessness at its peak, murdering an inmate whose cell he was assigned to share only minutes after entering. The murder weapon was a makeshift shank crafted from a metal cell door, which he used to stab Rodney DeLong. DeLong only had 7 months left before his sentence was completed, but as an enemy of the Aryan Brotherhood, he would never get his chance at freedom. Number 3. Los Zetas. When a cartel is explicitly known for being brutal and violent, even by cartel standards, it's obvious they mean serious business. Los Zetas began as a military enforcement arm for the Gulf Cartel before breaking away to form their own gang. They rapidly expanded until at one point they were the single largest cartel in all of Mexico in 2010. The Gulf Cartel saw this sort of expansion as a major threat to their power, which resulted in a civil war between them and Los Zetas. For a long time, Los Zetas thrived in the war-torn environment under the command of its original 31 leaders that brought paramilitary efficiency to an organization dedicated to brutality. Los Zetas have been responsible for many crimes over the years, and their decision to use shock and awe strategies in order to enforce their status has led to gruesome crimes being conducted in their name. In March of 2021, Los Zetas hijacked numerous passenger buses on the Mexican Federal Highway 101 in San Fernando, before attackers climbed onto them and caused a massacre. Authorities found 47 mass graves stuffed with corpses and eventually dug out the bodies of another 193 victims. Reports show that the female victims had been violently raped and that the males were forced to fight each other to the death with hammers, knives, and machetes in order to recruit for Los Zetas. It truly shows how gruesome they are. Number 2. 18th Street Gang. They say every day in Los Angeles someone is a victim to a crime committed by the 18th Street Gang. This gang is a group of notorious Central Americans that have turned the region, as well as the other parts of the U.S., into homicide hotspots. This gang is partially credited with turning the Central American Triangle into a region with the single highest homicide rate in the world, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. The gang has its origins near the 18th Street and Union Avenue in the Rampart district of LA, and started off as an exclusively Mexican-American gang before they opened their recruitment for people of a variety of ethnic and cultural backgrounds. A very aggressive approach towards organized crime, to be sure. Nearly thrice as violent as LA's most active gangs, their homicide rate inspires terror among city residents. While they rely on trafficking drugs as their main source of money, it's not stopped them from engaging in other illegal and cruel activities, from human trafficking, illicit firearm sales, prostitution, kidnapping, and more. The gang constantly seeks out violence specifically to establish themselves as the most terrifying street gang out there, with the point of making a mark with high-profile crimes throughout their history. In 1998, Catarino Gonzalez fatally shot a police officer who was sitting in a patrol car through the back of his head. More recently, they were involved in the kidnapping and murder of famous Honduran footballer Wilson Palacios' 16-year-old brother in 2009. However hard they've tried, though, they've been unable to truly establish themselves as the most violent street gang on the planet. As if that's a title someone should be proud of. No, it's their bitter rivals that take the top spot, leading us to our next and final entry in this list. Number 1. Mara Salvatrucha. The Mara Salvatrucha gang takes the cake on being considered the most dangerous gang in the world by far. And why should anyone be surprised when the gang's motto is, quote, kill, rape, and control? Originating in Los Angeles back in the 1970s, the gang consisted of El Salvadoran immigrants hoping to protect their own community in LA from other gangs. The El Salvadoran Civil War displaced hundreds of thousands of people into other lands, and many found themselves living in LA with minimal mobility and agency at the time. Mara Salvatrucha began as a way to keep this unwillingly immigrated population safe from the violence of street gangs and others in areas they were forced to live in. However, this mission devolved from nobility to cruelty, and the gang became violent in its methods, losing its once good intentions. But how does something like that happen? For an organization to undergo such a drastic change in direction, it usually requires a radical leader to bring about change, and Ernesto Deras did just that. As a former member of the Salvadoran Special Forces, he utilized his military training to discipline the gang and improve its logistical operations. Immediately, the gang began to grow in power, and they began to trek down a violent road. Their list of heinous crimes carried out by 50,000 gang members, of which 10,000 reside in the US, makes every other gang on this list look like a little playground bully. On December 23, 2004, a bus was intercepted in Chamalacon, Honduras, and sprayed with gunfire from assault rifles, leading to 28 dead and 14 wounded, most being women and children. The massacre was a deliberate protest against the government for restoring capital punishment, but the method was beyond gruesome and awful. A gunman climbed aboard the bus and executed passengers individually. The scope of their crimes has not reduced even a tiny bit in the years since. In 2010, Reni Melleja was accused of murdering a 2-year-old child. The baby's mother upset the gang by having rival members beat up her ex-boyfriend who belonged to the Mara Salvatrucha. They lured her into the woods before killing her and then shot her baby in the head. One gang member, Walter Giovanni Gomez, was even added to the FBI's most wanted list after killing his friend by stabbing him in the back of the head with a screwdriver 17 times just for associating with another gang. And that's after he'd already slit his throat. Yeah, and that was his friend. Just think what he would do to a stranger. Thanks for watching. Which one of these gangs do you fear the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.